Welcome back to my third video in this introduction to data analytics series. Thank you so very much for every single one of you who have shown so much love and support to my first and my second video. For those of you who have just joined my channel or who have been recommended to this particular video, I would really request you guys to go and watch my first video where I talk about the KDD process. For those of you who are completely new into this field of analytics and don't know what KDD process is, KDD process is basically an end-to-end machine learning process that we use when we try to solve a machine learning problem for a particular business or for a particular problem statement. Now, in the first video of the KDD process, I have mentioned the 7 steps that actually make the entire KDD process, where I have briefly spoken about each and every step. And what I'm doing now is basically creating individual videos where I go into detail and talk about that step in depth. So today's video is going to be focusing on the second step of the KDD process, which is known as the data collection and data gathering. Now, you're a data analyst and you're working for a firm, or let's say you're working for a client. Now, let's say this client is, let's say he's an XYZ client, just for now. Let's assume that. All right. Now, you have already understood the business process part of this XYZ client. Now, the second step of the KDD process is to actually go out and collect data, because as data analyst, mostly 95 to 97% of the time, you're going to be working with data. So today we're going to talk about the different ways and how you can actually go and collect data. Now, the first step that we can collect data is directly from the company or the client itself. Now, let's give a name to this client so that we are all on the same page. Let's say this client is Netflix. Okay. Now, if you're working for Netflix, or if you have been appointed to solve a specific problem for Netflix, you would be wanting data. So we all know that Netflix is a movies platform where people go and watch various sort of movies, different genres, etc., etc. Now, as a data analyst, if you're working on some sort of a machine learning problem, the one way to get data is to directly approach the company and get the data. Now, a lot of time what happens is that Netflix, let's say, would provide you with data from, let's say, 2010 to 2018. Okay, and you have been asked to work on a recommendation system model for them. Sorry guys, I don't understand why I keep bringing up recommendation system as an example. It's probably because that I did my thesis on recommendation system, but trust me, this example would be quite easy for you guys to follow and understand. Let's say Netflix has provided you with the data from 2010 to 2018, but we still have missing data. We don't have data for 2019 and 2020. So now in this case, what can you do as data analyst to acquire the most recent and relevant data for Netflix? Guys, it's very simple. Now, let's say you have been, so let me put Netflix here. Okay. Now, let's give an example that Netflix has movies. And let's say this is year released. And then this is variable X, variable Y, blah, blah, blah. And there are so on many other variables. Okay. Let's say Netflix has given you this data. This movie was released in 2000, let's say 12, then 2016, 2011, and so on. But when you want to model such kind of data, you would want the most relevant and the most up-to-date data. Now, if you want your model to be as robust as possible, it's advisable to work with the most recent data. Now, how can you acquire data for, let's say, 2019 and 2020? It's very simple, through a process known as API. Now, I've briefly mentioned about APIs in my first video where I gave an example of Twitter and how you can use API to actually get data from Twitter. But today we're going to be talking in the context of movies. Let's say you have data up to 2018. Now, I want data for 2019 and 2020. Now, how can I acquire this data? I can use an API. For those of you who don't know what an API is, an API is basically an application process interface. So it's basically acts like your middleman. Basically, you can use an API key to acquire data from companies. So let's say there is a very huge platform. Let's call this platform X. Platform X, who has movies data up to 2020 October. Okay. Now what you can do is you can use this API. Let me use a different color so it's easier. So what you can do, you can use this API as a data analyst, and through this API you can API key, you can get access to the data on this particular platform. Once we have used that data and collected movies from 2019 and 2020, we can directly use that API key and create a data frame to store that particular data for the 2 years 2019 and 2020. Okay, now what you can do as data analyst, you can pick data that you have from Netflix, and you can pick data that you have from this API. And what you can do, you can compile both the data together and create a single data frame which has all the movies from 2010 to 2020. So in short, APIs are very powerful to get hold of more data in case you're missing out on some sort of data. Now, this was an example of an API. Another way you could have acquired this data is by going to Wikipedia and running a basic web scraping on Wikipedia to acquire data for 2019 and for 2020 movies. Now, I will talk about how to actually do web scraping. I'll put out a video where I'll use Python or I'll use R to actually do some sort of a web scraping for you guys, so it's easier for you to follow along. But for now, what's really important is for you to understand the concepts, for you to understand what are the different ways in which we can acquire such type of data. Now, this was the case when we have missing data. Now, for instances, there will be time where you don't have any data at all. A company may have, let's say, data which is not good at all, which has no relevancy. So in that case, you would need to perform some sort of web scraping, or you would need to use APIs to acquire more data from external sources. So what we have learned today is that there are two ways. In a very broad aspect, there are basically two ways. Let me change the color. So what we have learned today is that for data collection, there are basically two ways that I look at it. So first is your internal, and the second one is external. Now, what sort of things are we covering in internal? This can be your company records or any sort of third party company records. That we may acquire, or we can consider external data collection techniques, which can include web scraping and which can include APIs. So these are the two ways in how we can actually go about and collect our data for a machine learning problem. So guys, I hope this video helped you and it was a value add. I know this was a little shorter compared to the other videos that I've done, but what I'm trying to do is basically make you guys understand the main steps and how you can approach the KDD process and the different techniques and different ways you can use to actually execute each step in a structured way. I'm pretty sure that there are other ways of also acquiring the data, and this, you can find that out on Google as well. But from what I have used the most are basically your APIs and the web scraping techniques. So I hope this video helped every single one of you. And next video we'll be talking about data cleaning, and we'll be talking about how we can reduce noise in the data, how we can do anomaly detection, how we sample data. So the next video would be very interesting, and the next video would be released on Friday. So thank you so much if you have stayed till the end. As I said in my earlier videos, that I'll be making a Dropbox link where I can share all these notes with you guys. And if you guys know anyone who is interested to learn more about data analytics or data science, or is just curious about learning more about analytics, do share this video with them. And till next time, keep learning, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much. Bye bye.